I'd like to wait. Thank you, Carrie. I'd like to wait 5 minutes or so. Really want to respect your time and everyone's time. And the scheduling conflict is unfortunate, but happens. So we will be here just waiting for giving folks a few minutes to get over here and getting sandwiches. That's what we're doing. Oh, and I'm Angela. Should have started with that. I'm really glad y'all are here. So everyone is welcome. You already ate, you said, but you can, you're welcome to sit here. Yeah, of course. Come to the table. Sit wherever you would like. Very respectful. I don't think it's too bad.
Lizzie, can you hear us?
Yeah, hi Laura.
Hi, did you watch that? I think that went really well just now.
Yeah, Robin, you killed it.
Oh, no, I think this is.
Hi, Lizzie. Yeah, I hope I filled in those holes. It was, I'm just saying like, this is gonna pass.
Thank you. That was excellent. Thank you both so much for your help.
Are you still in Los Angeles?
Yeah,
One more day?
yeah, I'm coming back tonight.
That's always.
Yeah, I know.
Where are you based out of usually?
DC.
DC, okay.
Yeah.
I was just in DC for the past week.
Yeah, I think we just missed each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's better. I had it yesterday. That was good. We need two sandwiches.
Zach, are you still there? You took yourself off camera.
Yes, I am here. I was just going to.
You work with Jonathan Haidt?
It was very big.
Yep, I am John's lead researcher.
Uh-huh.
Do you know John's work?
We
Oh
know
my
it,
God.
we know it very well.
Oh.
I think I've printed probably 50 to 100 copies of his Atlantic article. The call for phone-free schools and distributed
Yeah.
them en masse throughout the state.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're
Yeah,
very.
we worked on
very
that one
familiar.
together.
Yeah.
Did you? That's so cool. Yeah, so, okay, good. I'm at a progressive church in Vermont and I have your article printed out and like 50 copies always available for everybody.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you. That's amazing.
And just so you guys know, when you talk, we have Jane Twingy's graph here. Can you see what I'm pointing to? It's the Gene Twingy graph that shows in 2012 was the mark of the upswing in youth mental health outcomes.
Yep.
Laura Marquez Garrett knows that graph, but we have it blown up in a 2 by 3 foot poster.
Oh my
So
God.
if you need to reference it, it's here.
Yeah.
It's here in the room.
Great.
And Zach, it's litigation, so
Oh, good.
I'm sure we'll meet again at some point soon.
Yeah, it's great to meet all of you. The work you're doing is amazing. So really happy to be here.
You're the wind beneath the wings.
Since we have a couple minutes, I'd still like to, I'm gonna send one quick text being like, yo, enough partying, come over here. But do we want to just do a quick introduction since we have a few minutes? And we can start in the room. I'll introduce our speakers as, yeah, how about we start in the room? Because Laura and Robin have been doing a lot of work in this area specific to Vermont. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves, and then we can move around the room.
Sure. I'm Laura Derendinger. I'm a public health nurse. I have 4 children, teenagers down to an 8-year-old. And I'm one of the parents that drafted the phone-free school legislation along with other parents that they got introduced. And I'm also a volunteer with the Fair Play Group, which has been advocating for COSA and age-appropriate design code for years now. So my blueprint is to take independent peer-reviewed research, such as Dr. Height, Dr. Twingy's research, and make that inform what our policy looks like. That's sort of what I was put on this earth to do, perhaps. And I'll just plug that we know this is a battle, because what is healthy for children and healthy for public health and healthy for families and communities is often distinctly at odds with the business agenda of profits and commercialization. So voila, that's our battleground. And I have Pastor Robin Junker Boyce here. She's one of the moms in this effort.
Yeah. So I'm Robin Younger-Boyce. I'm a pastor for Progressive UCC Church in Thetford Hill, and I've been doing advocacy work for about 25 years. And I think when I first came on board, well, actually, we're just doing introductions.
Yeah.
I don't need to like go into my background. So anyway, I got into this work actually through the work of advocating for positive, for healthy relationships, especially sexual relationships for young people. The UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association, and the UCC created a curriculum in the 80s, a human sexuality curriculum that really was about how, because we believe that the churches were doing a detriment, and society itself and advertising industry to they were not promoting what a healthy, like, loving relationship could look like regardless. And so we were on the forefront of gay rights and trans rights in the 80s and 90s. But there was a point at which, after 10 years of teaching this curriculum, that we realized that there was an issue with healthy relationships, human to human relationships happening with young people, and social media use, and especially around pornography and its effect on the physiology of a young person. And so that's when I started to realize, if social media and pornography are having effects on the human body's ability to relate to another human being, I wonder what other effects it's having on our ability to look into each other's eyes, to care about one another, to have healthy touch and be engaged in our senses. And so that was kind of what launched me into like this investigation around, just because I'm an advocate for healthy, like, community and caring and loving relationships. I thought, I've got to look into this because it's affecting, and now we're seeing how social media creates what the dean of the Hartford Middle School coined as like a digital haze around us. Like, it has its positive attributes, but it also is eroding our communities. And so I'm here as an advocate for healthy communities and healthy relationships, and being okay to be embodied in our senses as we are, and not needing to be so attached and addicted to something that wants us to be addicted and wants our attention more than it wants this type of attention. So
Thank you. Thank you for that. You want to introduce yourself?
I'm James Carr, and I'm a legislative page at the State House this session.
Thank you so much for being here. Go ahead, y'all. Might as well.
Hi, Anthony Wilson. I'm interning for Representative Stebbins.
Hi, I'm Penelope Keen, and I'm interning for Representative Rowan Keen.
I'm Elle Medford, and I'm interning for Representatives Chapin and Arsenal. And I'm Marcy Edelstein. I'm the mom of Elle. Came out for the day to see what happens in State Health, and I'm super excited to hear more and maybe ask some questions. And as a parent of kids with social media, I understand the battle.
And then we have,
And I'm Carrie Brown. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Commission on Women.
so I think I'm a little unsure of how to proceed, but so I'm just going to go with it. And I'm Representative Angela Arsenault, represent Williston, and also the lead sponsor of H797, which is the Vermont Social Media Safety Act. I think if it's all right with, and oh, Ella on screen. Thank you. Go ahead, Ella, introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Representative Ella Chapin from East Montpelier. I'm away right now with my family, but really grateful for this conversation and so sorry it ended up being in conflict with another huge event that just got planned 2 days ago, but we are recording and I know that there are a number of legislators really interested in hearing from everyone. So I don't know what you want to do, Angela, but I know that recording this conversation will make it available to a number of people.
Yes, so I was going to say, I think we should get started. I have a feeling some folks will trickle in, and we'll be sharing the recording with our mailing list, which is about 100 people strong, thankfully, at this point. So I'd love to, I guess, kick us off by just saying that we have 3 bills, really 4, I guess, 4 bills right now under consideration in the legislature that relate to this topic. The Age Appropriate Design Code bill, the Phone Free Schools bill, which is both are in the Senate right now, being considered in Senate committees. And then we have the Social Media Safety Act, which is on the wall in House Commerce and Economic Development. But also in House Commerce and Economic Development, they're working diligently on a pretty broad data privacy bill that does have a specific, a youth specific component. And after crossover, which is the week ending March 15th, those Senate bills will come over to the House. And there could be an opportunity then to perhaps offer amendments to the Age Appropriate Design Code bill, potentially incorporating some of what's in the Social Media Safety Act. That's one of my hopes, but just put that out there. So that all is to say there's action and interest and actual stuff happening, more than just conversations. We have actual bills that are being considered. So I was hoping we could start with you, Zach, and if you can let us know a little bit about you and what you do. And then it seemed like a good way to start to have you. I know we all work in data, but you probably maybe more so than the rest of us in a way. So if you could ground us in the data and really connecting for us. I use the word causation. I'm curious to hear what word you use, if it's correlation in your mind or but between the rise of social media and the decline in youth and adolescent mental health.
That all sounds great. So everybody can hear me okay? Just want to make sure.
Yes.
Great. Well, again, thank you so much for inviting me here today. And I what it sounds like is my talk, I hope, will give you the validation that you guys need, and just knowing how important it is, the work that you're doing. So I'm going to share my screen because I have a slide deck too. As a researcher, I need that. Oh, can I?
There you go. You should be able to now.
Great. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Okay, so my name is Zach Rausch. I'm an associate research scientist at New York University. I work with the social psychologist, Jonathan Haidt. I've been working with him for about 4 years, and over that time, I've been studying adolescent mental health trends, the impact of digital technology on kids and on democracy more broadly. And we just finished a book that's coming out next month that's called The Anxious Generation, how the great rewiring of childhood caused an epidemic of mental illness. And that is what I thought I would talk a bit about today, and answering some of the questions that you brought up. But I want to start with a study that actually came out last year at the National Bureau of Economic Research called When Product Markets Become Collective Traps, the Case of Social Media. This was a really fascinating study to me. It was among about 1,000 college students around the United States. And what they did was they had participants answer 2 questions. So they were in 2 different conditions. And condition 1 is that they asked the participants how much money it would take for them to deactivate their Instagram and TikTok accounts for 4 weeks. And the answer that they got was, well, on average, you'd have to pay me $50. They did this again in condition 2. They asked the same exact question, except they added a little thing at the end. What if we got most of the other participants to do this as well? Most of the other people on campus? The answer here was less than 0. So in other words, this is a line from their conclusion, which I thought was very powerful. The students prefer the product not to exist, but cannot coordinate to stop using it. In other words, the students would have paid the researchers to get everybody else off the app, showing once again that young people are trapped. They're stuck in a trap on platforms where they're being taken advantage by social media companies, and it has devastated their mental health. And so that's what I'm going to talk about in my talk here. So I'm going to talk about the scope and scale of what's happening among young people, the cost of what we call the phone-based childhood. And you're already doing most of the solutions I'm going to bring up, so just give you the validation, I hope, to move that forward. So when I began working on this project and trying to understand what was happening to young people, we noticed that there was a pattern in the mental health data that kept coming up again and again. And the first was that the mental health seemed to start deteriorating in the early 2010s. Before that, rates of different kinds of issues were generally quite stable. And then right after, things start to change. It tended to hit girls harder than boys, especially in absolute terms when we're looking at depression, anxiety, self-harm. And it was concentrated among these certain subsets of disorders called internalizing disorders, anxiety, depression. It hit adolescents harder than adults, specifically Gen Z, those born after 1995. And then it wasn't just happening in the United States, it was happening in a bunch of countries around the world. And so I'm just going to show you a couple of graphs, which I think all of you probably have seen a lot of these to get a sense of this. So this is major depressive episodes in the last year, coming from the National Survey of Drug Use and Health from the US. And before 2010, as you can see, the lines are relatively stable. Girls are typically a little higher than boys on average anyway. And then after 2010, all hell breaks loose. And so there was a 145% increase among girls and 161% increase among boys since 2010. And in fact, by 2021, just about 1 in 3 teen girls are reporting to have had a major depressive episode in the last year. It's become a normal part of American adolescence to be depressed. It's not just depression. There's over a tripling of emergency department visits for non-fatal self-harm. This is among the youngest tweens, ages 10 to 14. And rates for boys and girls are rising, but as you can see for girls, it's really quite shocking. Now, emergency department visits can be explained by a lot of things, but we're also seeing a rise in actual hospitalizations, the most extreme cases of harm. And that has actually increased among this group for over 500% since 2007 and 8. And I learned about this term the other day called boarding that's used in the emergency department. And what it means is that there are not enough beds in hospitals for the demand of kids who need it. And so kids are getting stuck in the emergency departments for weeks at a time. And they call this boarding. And it's just, again, a signal of what we're going through right now. Same thing is happening in the UK. So this is self-harm episode, ages 13 through 16. It's also happening in Canada. So this is 13 to 17-year-olds. And I have very similar graphs in Australia and New Zealand. And it's also suicide. So this is 10 to 14-year-olds where rates really started to rise. And it's important to note, this is really where the boy's story starts to become clear. And it's we found using, this is the a PISA survey, which surveys a bunch of countries all over the world every 3 years. And this is rates of school loneliness. So it's a study that looks at test scores mostly, but they have some items on well-being. And what we can see here just generally is that all across the world, rates, again, were relatively steady before 2012. And so what happened? There are all sorts of explanations and reasons why this change happened. And we've tried to address a lot of these in our own work and in Jean Twenge's work. And a lot of these explanations, from the global financial crisis to just changing norms around stigma, don't quite explain what happened. Now, what I'm going to talk about here is what we believe happened. And that's that childhood transformed very rapidly in the period of 2010 to 2015. There was a bit of a backstory, but the key idea here was that childhood moved from one that was primarily play-based in real life with other kids to one that was primarily phone-based. And this happened very quickly. So for those of you in the room who were born before the 1980s or so, this might be what childhood looked like, right? So you're full of in-person social interaction, play, maybe you're hanging from a clothesline, you're super creative, you're testing out things, you're failing, you're making mistakes, and you're with other kids and often unsupervised. This might be what you might notice from childhood today. More often than not, being alone, even when we're with other people, heads down in front of screens. It is this radical reorganization of childhood and adolescent social life is what we believe is the primary driver of the youth mental health collapse. So let me tell you a little bit more about that and that story and why we think this is the case. So this is the share of American households using different technologies over time. There's this kind of big upswing for a lot of different technologies. That's just showing that's the period when everybody seems to be getting that thing. And social media and smartphones come together right around 2010. And what's also key is that there were a lot of technological changes happening at this time that made these platforms very alluring to young people. So smartphones, for example, come out in 2007. You have the App Store in 2008, which allows for different kinds of addictive and engaging applications, different companies competing with each other. And then you get a bunch of new features like the like button, the retweet button, push notifications that ping you throughout the day. And then what's key is that this is when teens move their social lives onto these platforms. We can see this here on the right. This is from Monitoring the Future, an American survey showing that in 2009, just about 50% of American high schoolers were using social media platforms almost every day. Within 2 years, that goes up to just around 75%. So we reached this critical mass. Now, I can't just point to two things and say that this is one is causing the other. So let's go a little bit deeper here. It's not only that they're using these platforms every day, the quantity of time starts to grow very, very rapidly. So by 2015, 15% of American girls are spending more than 40 hours a week on social media platforms alone. That's not counting all of the other digital activities that are being done. By 2019, the average teen is spending 8 to 9 hours on screens per day. Also in 2019, about 1 in 5 boys are spending 4 hours or more gaming. And a recent Common Sense survey found that 40% of teen boys report watching pornography at least 3 times a week. By 2022, girls are spending an average of 4 hours a day on social media platforms. And then by 2022 as well, a Pew study found that 1/3 of teens say they're on one of the 5 major social media platforms almost all the time, and just about half said that they're online almost all of the time of their life. So an enormous amount of time is being spent here. This is the mass transition and movement onto these platforms. And when we look at the data, we start to see that the evidence is also pointing to direct harm from these platforms on mental health outcomes. This is a study from the UK of over 16,000 teenagers, showing on the x-axis on the bottom, hours per day on social media platforms, and on the y is the percent with depression. What we see is that relatively correlational studies, heavy users have twice the rate of depression generally as lighter users. And in a separate meta-analysis of 26 studies just like this one, where we're looking at dose response changes, there's for every 1 hour increase in use, there's a 13% increase for depression among adolescents. And yeah, I believe, so these studies, these correlational studies are showing the same trend over and over again. It also explains the age difference that I was talking about in that pattern of mental health problems. An important study found that it's specifically between the ages of 11 to 13 for girls and 14 to 15 for boys when the harm of these platforms seemed to be strongest. This is during the period of puberty, especially early puberty, as we're going through enormous psychological, biological, and physical changes. These platforms seem to be most harmful during this time. Now, we also have a bunch of experimental studies showing that deactivating social media increases well-being, and there are a variety of other research here. But another just essential point is that it's not just the research showing this. It's, if you ask young people, they also blame social media. This is a study of over 4,000 Australian youth, 12 to 25 years old, asking them, what is the main cause for the decline of youth mental health? The number one answer is social media. And the companies know. In their own internal research that was released by Frances Haugen in the Facebook files, show that they know that Instagram in particular is quite toxic for teen girls, making 1/3 of teen girls' body image worse, which was directly from their own research. And there are a variety of other harms that come with this kind of phone-based childhood and life. So again, I talked about just the opportunity cost. How much time is put into this, into screens, that is not being put into all other aspects of life: in-person socialization, sleep, time with family, you name it. It's led to attention fragmentation, constantly being pulled away from other people. And we've seen significant declines in test scores since 2012 across all OECD nations. So many different nations showing the same trends. And a rise in behavioral addictions, where about 1 in 10 girls have generally problematic use of social media, 1 in 11 boys having problematic gaming use. And the question that we ask, is there any other consumer product we'd let children use if we know it causes compulsive behavior, social problems, depression, and or academic deficits in 1 out of 10 girls or 1 in 10 teen boys? Absolutely not. And so this is the thread of causality that we've painted out in our work: the international collapse in mental health, the timing of the movement onto these platforms, what the correlational studies show, what the longitudinal experimental studies show, what the kids say, and even what the internal research from these companies say. And so that's where we are at. Now, I began this talk about this early study around collective action problems, where the students prefer not to use the platforms, but can't coordinate to stop using it. And so parents and teens are trapped. No teen wants to be the only one not on these platforms. No parent wants to be the one to tell their kids, no, you can't be on this platform. and be disconnected from everyone that you know and where social life is happening. And so what we need to do is we need to find what are called collective action solutions. And the 4 foundational reforms that we propose is that we delay smartphones until high school. We delay social media until 16. We push for phone-free schools. And at the same time, we try to give back that play-based childhood by providing more childhood independence, more free play, more responsibility more broadly. And so what I was going to talk about, was just about phone-free schools, but it sounds like Vermont is already on the forefront of this. Because I think this is among the most important solutions and most doable, and really pushing past instructional time bans to phone lockers, phone pouches, and really encouraging schools to go phone-free, helping fund schools and funding research to see the outcomes of this. And Vermont can lead the way on this. And I just want to thank you all for inviting me here to talk about this issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zach. I know we have some folks in the room who would argue whether or not Vermont is at the forefront of this. Where the bill is out there, but what happens to it is in question. So I want to allow some time at the end for questions. So if we move on, is that okay with you all? So I will say I just had chills on, had like goosebumps at the first stat that you shared, that kids want to get off and can't. It actually makes me like, damn, it's so frustrating and it's devastating to me what's happening right now. So Laura, if you want to carry the devastating theme, go right ahead.
Yeah, it gets worse, right? So my name's Laura Marquez Garrett. I'm an attorney out of Seattle, Washington. I am a parent of 4 young kids, which is why I'm here. To echo what Laura Derringer said earlier, the universe sort of put me here. 2 years ago, I was a partner at a large firm with my successful business litigation practice, typically defense side, actually. And then a series of circumstances happened. And as a parent, it was sort of a no-brainer. So February of 2022, I joined the Social Media Victims Law Center. Our firm was founded at the end of 2021 by a brilliant and very successful plaintiff, personal injury, products liability attorney who had seen the Facebook whistleblower documents. And that was sort of a light bulb moment for him where he said, wait a sec, these aren't just third parties. This isn't speech. This isn't, kids that are going online looking to meet strangers. These are product designs. These are things the companies know they're doing it on purpose, and kids are getting hurt as a result. So he forms SMVLC at the end of 2021. I joined in February 2022. And in that period of time, we're at like 2 years, since I've been there, we've been retained by over 2,000 families in connection with harms, ranging from addiction to depression to self-harm, suicide, things that I never conceived even existed, harms to children that are happening rampantly. I personally have met now with hundreds of children and families. I've heard their stories. I've seen police reports with photos of their dead bodies. I've also, and I think really importantly, I've seen the data from their social media accounts. There is a whole side of this that most of us never see, and it's not designed for us to see it. So we pull that data. I've seen the data, and I also have a PowerPoint, which I've sort of cobbled together. And I want to show it. Hopefully I can get this to work, because I think it's such an incredible and often missing piece here. And I will go through this pretty quickly. I'm not going to go on everyone, but let's see. Are you guys able to see that? Hang on. I think I need to share my other screen.
We saw, there you go. Yep, that looks right.
Okay, you guys can see it now. All right. So I'm going to go through these kind of quick because I just want to illustrate a lot of these points that I think we just heard about. This is my Snapchat account. I don't use my Snapchat account. And so this is going to be designed to show you all how these products work differently for kids as they do for adults, why they're so harmful, and how they're targeting children. This is a 46-year-old female, self-identified 46-year-old female Snapchat account. never used. As you'll see here, this is the feed, Discover, that Snap claims to curate, right? So this is not your friends. This is the stuff that Snap is saying, hey, you might want to see this. This is my feed. We opened a test account for a 14-year-old boy. This is his feed. And this is not, again, no searches, right? So this is the stuff that Snapchat thinks is appropriate for the 14-year-old male versus an adult. And we meet with families all the time. I was on a call the other day with a mom and her daughter looked at her mom's Facebook and said, what is this? Where are the sex ads? This is unreal. Like, this is like rated G social media. So our kids are not seeing what we are seeing. This is another young man. These are the searches we found in his TikTok account, right? Typical 16-year-old boy stuff. He searches for motivational speech on TikTok, searches for it. The same day, this is what TikTok sends him. I can't effing take it anymore. Might not be able to pull the bitches. I can pull the trigger. Pardon my language. Sleeping is not enough. I need to die. This is a, trigger warning for folks. This is literally a video that TikTok chose for this 16-year-old boy. Sorry. So for folks that couldn't read it, when it gave those two, it was kill myself and ease my pain, wake up and go to school, being ignored and bullied. This young man was 16 years old. He was not searching for this stuff. Through his account, we were able to find thousands and thousands of these types of videos that were sent to him. One day he goes to the gym, kisses his mom goodbye, goes to the gym. On his way home, he stops at an unfenced portion of railroad track, steps in front of a train, texts his best friend, I can't do it anymore, I'm tired. We see this. This is one out of multiple 16-year-old children that I have seen who have died by suicide. And when we get into their TikToks, it is a nightmare. And none of it's stuff they search for. Drugs, right? This is what and if you know any young people on Snapchat, I always say, don't ask your kids, do you like social media? Ask them more pointed questions. Have you ever seen a drug menu? Has Snapchat ever recommended that you friend a plug, which is a name for a dealer? This is what many teens, in particular, we see it more with teen boys on Snapchat. This is my own children, and I like to use this example because I think YouTube flies under the radar a lot. This was, we were at a senior care facility for my 100-year-old grandmother-in-law's, great-grandmother-in-law's birthday. The children were in a media room, age 3 to 11. I walk in, the 11-year-old has turned on YouTube. I had no idea he could even get YouTube in the room. They were watching a Disney movie. And pretty quickly I realized there was some disturbing stuff going on. This is the video that my 3 to 8-year-old children. Right. So, well, you see the dubbing there. I have other videos of this where they started talking about George having coronavirus, things like this. Young children. I recognize that video because it goes back to this. You'll see the slowly starting to realize killing those innocent children has brought me great satisfaction. That image that's being superimposed on YouTube on a child's account is actually a very good I'll skip through some of this. We've got a young man here. This is another YouTube case we've got where a young man was being shown, I killed myself prank videos. He was, I believe, 13 at the time. He was trying to play one of these pranks that the YouTube was pushing to his account, and he survived ultimately, but he does have brain damage. Of course, many people have heard of the blackout challenge. What we have seen again in these kids' data, young children being pushed stuff. I've seen TikTok gives you 90 days of data. I checked one of a young child search data, 90 days. You've got BMX races, searching for things normal kids search for. And yet, because of the programming, these products, these kids are getting, how to choke yourself until you pass out type videos. User recommendation technologies. And sorry for going fast. I just want to make sure I leave time for other folks and that you all can see some of the most important stuff here. This is a meta document. In the past, there are people you may know contributed up to 75% of all inappropriate adult minor contact. I have seen this in a 12-year-old's Instagram account, a predator who literally said, I wouldn't have found you except for the recommendations, and then proceeds to exploit her. That was one I had to report to NCMEC because there was child sexual abuse material in there. And I would never wish that on anyone. Another test that we ran, a self-identified 16-year-old female on Snapchat, and here is who they recommend for her friends. These are all sex trade pick, as you can see in their names. Gamification and reward features, Snapchat, right? You've got the scores, the trophies, the streaks, the charms. Here's a test we ran 2 days ago that nobody's actually seen before. Part of the danger, we see these young girls who are often being exploited on Snapchat. I've met with many of them and they will tell me things like, I actually thought these people were my friends. Snapchat said, these are people you may know. They said they're your friends. I was 12 years old. I didn't understand. This is one of Snapchat's features, right? Where you actually can't put your own photo on Snapchat. You have to use its Bitmoji. So we fed a picture of Charles Manson into Snapchat. This is what Snapchat does to scary people. It makes them look fun, right? Harvey Weinstein. We have a whole series of these and you would be shocked. And the reason we did this test was because in this case, we had a 12-year-old girl who was raped by somebody that Snapchat connected her to. He groomed her. He said, if you don't meet with me, I'm going to expose all these photos I got you to exchange. And I don't have those pictures up here, but when you see his mugshot compared to his Bitmoji, it is shocking. And that is part of why a lot of these young kids are saying, look, I didn't think this was a stranger. I didn't know this was dangerous. It goes against everything we've taught our kids about strangers and about what to watch out for. Speed filter, right? Snap literally created a filter that encouraged children. It would get you at the speed you were going. So kids were posting 140, 160. Somebody at Snapchat thought that was a good idea, apparently. And the crazy thing is, Snap didn't take that down until litigation in which people had died, young children, third parties. They didn't even take it down until after, I believe, it was one of the court decisions had been reversed by the Court of Appeals, right? So basically, they didn't take the filter down until they knew that they were going to be liable or had the risk of liability. I want to raise this real quick because a lot of people don't realize this. Dark patterns. Even when these kids are signing up, this is a Snapchat account. You'll see here all of the subliminal messaging that you get in the background. Just hit allow. They also ask over and over, and it gets more and more kid-like, right? So here you go. Your friends are waiting for you. Give us access to your private information. The person who opened this test account 3 times, she was asked. She said no over and over, and she was asked over and over. The last one I'm going to do, and let me see if I can skip around. This is a Chromebook from a 14-year-old girl whose parents asked the school not to let her have access to any Wi-Fi enabled devices. She had tried to kill herself. She had been sending nude photos. This is her in class. The school said it's part of our curriculum. We do the best we can, but you don't have a choice. She's talking about in class on Discord how her parents have her locked down at home. Used to sell my nudes, tried to kill myself. They blame it on social media. This random stranger says, well, social media probably played a part in it, right? And then you will see as it goes on, someone's asking her for feet pics in class. Random strangers. I'm not going to read this one out loud. Hopefully you can see it on the screen. It is a 14-year-old girl literally being exploited in class on a Chromebook. Emma Claire Gill asked her parents if she can get a Snapchat because her basketball group at school uses it and her class uses it for homework. She's gone within a year of getting that Snapchat account. Michael Brewer, his old lacrosse coach, showed him the Snapchat filters. He thought it was cool. And so even though his parents said no, he opened a Snapchat and he purchased what he thought was a Percocet from one of these Snapchat dealers that were being pushed to him. I also will say I've met with Michael. He has permanent brain damage. He's this incredible kid. And he will tell you that when he was 12, he'd never heard of marijuana. His introduction to drugs, he said, when I got a Snapchat, it was constant and it made it look cool. There were pictures of young people like me doing it. All my friends wanted to try it. All of his exposure to drugs came through those programming decisions that Snapchat made. Lastly, and we touched on this earlier, right? These companies know, here's a meta document talking about, where is this? right? Meta document about teens' brains. This is like a marketing document where they talk about how they can change the product to better sort of capitalize on what they call the vulnerability of their undeveloped brains. You've got internal employees talking about how they're creating a world of addicted monsters. It's probably true. And then you've got these little tidbits, right? Tweens are herd animals. Young ones are the best ones. These are from internal meta documents. That should have stopped share. So I apologize for going through so fast. I just want people to see this data. We see this every single day. I've talked to these kids to address this addictive, this addicts narrative. I literally just wrote a letter to TikTok Council yesterday because I've got a young man who keeps opening TikTok accounts. And I'm literally asking these companies in the work that I do every day, if this kid tells you he doesn't, like, can you block his device? Will you block it if he asks you, if he begs you? Because he can't help himself, but he doesn't want to use your app. We see that every day, that addiction piece. So there we are.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Laura, for that and for the work that you're doing. I just got a text from my 15-year-old yesterday who's on vacation with my husband and my 13-year-old, and the 15-year-old said to me, I'm re-downloading that social media limit app because I think it's really bad for me. And this is a conversation we've had over and over and over again. And yeah.
I want to note, I mean, a lot of these kids, I ask kids now as a routine matter because this started coming up. A lot of children have seen live suicides and murders on these apps. And I don't say that lightly. And I'm also going to say, because of the algorithmic discrimination built into these products, it's programming. The companies know it's there. I find even more so with low income and persons of color, right? And so I've asked 10-year-old children, have you ever seen a live suicide? And they've seen, and I mean, I had a 10-year-old tell me, yeah, I've seen probably 8 or 9 of those murders and suicides. And the crazy thing is, I've talked to dozens of adults who I've never seen anything like that. Just fundamentally, because of how they're programming, these products are targeting our children. They are working differently for our kids than they are for adults, and they are causing incredible harms. And we can talk about causation and correlation all day, but there is no way as a 10-year-old witnessing live murders and suicides that is not harmful.
No, I agree. And one more anecdote. I was with my kids this weekend on vacation, and I kind of out of nowhere, my 15-year-old said, I got another one of those, the Palestinian, dead people in Palestine. And I said, wait, what do you, another one? And they said, yeah, this is just what I see all the time. And I was like, you don't have to look. And they said, well, I feel bad. I mean, it's happening. I can't just look away. Like, I should witness this. And I was like, no, I've never even seen that. Like, I choose not to. You can choose not to, but it's just what, even on like youth focused news sites, on Instagram and stuff, that's what is being served up. And then a 15-year-old brain thinks like, I must be somehow obligated to look at this.
Right. And the addiction, right? I mean, the reality is because of, I mean, I've met kids that are so addicted, they will be crying and telling you, I don't know why I can't stop, but I can't. As an adult, it's easier for us to look away. It just is. Our frontal lobe is developed. For these kids, they don't have that kind of self-control. They don't have the anchors that we have as adults. And so they get sucked right into it.
Well, let's talk about how we might change that with age-appropriate design code. Lizzie from Center for Humane Technology, please take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lizzie. I'm the Public Affairs Coordinator with CHT. Thanks so much for having me here. A little bit about CHT, Center for Humane Technology. We're a nonprofit working to realign technology with humanity's best interest. That's like our overall mission statement. And we were originally founded by former workers at major tech companies who saw firsthand in sort of like the early days of some of these major companies of how these products were designed to maximize our attention and our time online. In other words, to addict us for profit. And there was this sense of, why is nobody talking about this? And how do we make a change? Because products don't have to be this way. And because of these experiences, we've committed to advocacy for common sense regulation that incentivizes the design and the development of technology that enables us to live more fruitful lives. So how do we change the way that technologies are being built so that they can actually be serving humanity's best interests? A lot of you might know our work from the Social Dilemma documentary that was released in 2020, when its release was also unintentionally coinciding with the time where most people couldn't help but be online. There was this great desire to connect, but there was this ominous feeling like we couldn't even detach when we wanted to when things got back to normal. Candidly, I was in college at the time of the documentary's release, and we had a sorority event where we watched The Social Dilemma, and we could finally, put into words what we were all feeling. And it really illuminated why people, and especially kids and teens, felt like we couldn't resist scrolling or swiping. And it's because companies were intentionally designing their products to capitalize on our cognitive deficits and exploit our very human tendencies. And as internal reports have shown, this is especially true with kids and teens. Many of today's largest online companies prioritize profit over the well-being of kids. Meta's internal documents recently revealed that a 13-year-old child is valued at $270. So trust and safety teams were instructed not to spend more than $270 per kid to protect them online. And this is coming from a billion-dollar company where trust and safety probably accounts for less than 1%, if that, who knows? And if this, it's this, that Silicon Valley breeds its business model, driving all of its decision-making products. Ooh, sorry. And the products are being built and prioritized for money. It's not incentivizing a responsible product design, and it's been about two decades now, and we can't trust companies to design in a way that's most protective of our safety. We can't trust them to make the decisions anymore, and it's kind of out of their hands because we've tried with that and they failed. Which is what brings us to the Vermont Kids Code. And we strongly support this approach because it addresses the root cause of the problem of the way that technology is designed at the product level. And by changing the product before it goes to market, we can ensure that harm is mitigated before the products even reach kids. And we know that products can be useful and helpful in a way that connects us and, shares new resources that kind of open our eyes. But we also want to ensure that people have product safety standards like we do with physical products. A little bit about the Kids Code. It's an age-appropriate design code model bill that requires technology companies to assess their sites and apps to make sure that it's in alignment with kids' best interests and make any sort of design changes to enhance privacy and safety at the forefront. It's already been in place in the United Kingdom for about 2 years now, and it was unanimously passed in California and soon struck down, which I'll get into later. And the Kids Code rests on these two pillars, safety by design and privacy by default, both of which are focusing on preventing harms upfront rather than regulating after the fact. And the hope is to shift the incentive structure of product design to overall have kids' best interests in mind. With the Kids Code being implemented in the UK for the past 2 years, we've seen meaningful changes, which include turning off the autoplay feature on YouTube, Google's Safe Search browser being the default setting for kids under 18, and turning off push notifications on TikTok after a certain time of night so kids can actually get some sleep. And this differs between different ages of kids. So some of it might be earlier in the night and a little bit later for a little bit older kids. In general, big tech has been aggressively resistant to regulation of anything having to do with data, algorithms, design practices. And it's often done through trade groups like TechNet, Chamber of Progress, Net Choice, and the like. They'll claim that such laws are burdensome and they'll stifle innovation, but they do this through these proxy groups, like I said. Most of these major tech companies like Amazon, Google, and Meta will publicly claim a commitment to child safety while covertly retaining their priority of putting profit over kids. Like I said to Laura earlier, I'm based in DC, and in the lead up and aftermath of the big tech CEO hearing last month, you saw that major spaces around DC and many major cities were plastered in these advertisements from TikTok being like, here are how we support child safety. Here are the tools that we have that, prove that we are, safe for kids and why your kid should be on our platform. So they're able to have this double talk through these proxy trade groups, like I said. The trade groups like to employ scare tactics and double talk, and they can hide behind sympathetic figures to avoid accountability. So some of these lobbyists like to come in and say, as a parent, this is what I see. But they're coming in as parents and also representative of these big tech groups. So all the while, these tech giants can make empty statements and promises of safety while they continue to extract and sell the personal data of children and explicitly engineer addictive features. This is a manipulative rhetorical practice and highlights the root problem that companies continue to prioritize profit-driven motives over the safety and impacts of their products. Like I said, through the guise of the trade groups, they'll make arguments about the kids' code and other similar child safety bills and say things like, this legislation isn't going to work, it's going to break the internet. And the bill requirements are unclear, so we simply can't comply. When we know they're already complying elsewhere, so why shouldn't kids in Vermont have the same sort of protection capabilities? They're going to say this legislation is going to be worse for privacy. We're going to have to check for IDs at the door, basically, when the bill doesn't mandate any sort of age or identity verification, and companies are already making age estimations based on the data they already collect. They're going to say this legislation is going to be bad for already marginalized kids when the bill allows for safer access to all kids of identities of essential resources. They're going to say this legislation is going to harm innovation and business, which I'll touch upon more later, but it's not the case. It really changes business incentives. And they'll lastly like to harp on child safety should be parents' responsibility when it's very clear that parents can't do this on their own. And it's not a replacement for parental oversight, but we like to think about it as a digital seatbelt for supporting responsible parenting in the digital age. So a little bit about the California lawsuit and how it kind of speaks to the way that big tech's tactics are playing out in the legal system as well as in policymaking world. So like I said, the kids code is a big argument they like to make is about how the kids code is a First Amendment violation, when really the kids code has nothing to do with speech. It focuses on platform design and algorithms, not content. And it's a way of steering clear of regulating speech. The California lawsuit exemplifies how big tech is turning to the courts when they aren't successful at preventing legislation from passing. The California's age-appropriate design code was passed unanimously by the California legislature. The challenge in court was brought by NetChoice, one of these trade groups, which aims to block the regulation of the platforms to maximize their profits and allow them to continue to design their products with addicting, harmful, and data hoarding features. They like to hide behind the argument of the First Amendment and Section 230, trying to conflate regulating data privacy and design with speech and content moderation, which intentionally sows confusion and doubt among the public because they can mismatch words and get you to think it's about one thing when really it's not. The kids code is about regulating data management and practices and product design, not content-based regulation. Since the model code doesn't target any content or require tech companies to moderate content differently, it's not actually regulating protected speech under the First Amendment. And acknowledging the constitutionality of data privacy laws, the Vermont Kids Code strives to make the internet safer for children by overseeing how companies collect, manage, and use children's data without encroaching on protected speech. If the First Amendment prevents data privacy regulations from actually going through, then we'll never be able to make the internet a safer place. And the district court's broad decision, which is currently under appeal, dangerously empowers tech companies to unilaterally shape the online experiences for kids, undermines democratic processes, and stifles any sort of legislative avenue from continuing to go forward. And given the growing body of evidence that Zach and Laura have kind of touched on, there's going to be a real need for the state litigation efforts to combat them. And we know these companies are never going to prioritize our safety unless regulation requires them to do so. We really do believe the Kids Code will make a meaningful impact in shifting the incentive structure of overall business practices of companies who operate online. Rather than saying how they should make changes, it asks companies to comply to a sort of risk assessment and mitigate those risks, creating a new business landscape that values safety from the outset. It's structured with a primary focus on harm prevention and prioritizing measures that aim to prevent harm rather than merely punishing punishing companies. It's cost effective and its nature stems from smart design principles that lead to significant savings. And it kind of gets to bring to the front companies who are already practicing in safe business ways. By calling for safety by design and privacy by default, the Vermont Kids Code serves as a certain path of accountability for tech companies that simply requires tech to take a good, honest look at their products and mitigate harms and exploitation of our kids stemming from their data management practices. This sort of reasonable guardrail on data privacy and design aligns with consumers' expectation for safety, and the Kids Code is a common sense approach drawing from the lessons from other sectors like automobiles, aviations, and building safety. And we think that this balanced approach aimed at the overall business incentive will make a meaningful difference in protecting the citizens and allow for beneficial innovation where necessary.
Thank you so much, Lizzie. And that bill is currently in our Senate Economic Development
Housing.
Committee. And they're still in the process of hearing testimony, as I understand it. So I want to leave a couple minutes. I know, and it's 1:02. I'm happy to stay here all day, but I want to just allow some time for questions if anyone has any. Yeah, go ahead, B.
How, especially when I think kids are a lot more tech savvy than their parents in a lot of ways, how can we stop kids or at least put barriers to prevent kids from lying about their age on social media?
We don't. I mean, under the current, that's how the apps are designed, right? They don't want you to be able to stop. And so, look, earlier I said we work with over 2,000 families, and it's so crazy, but we see everything from parents who allowed phones, who didn't, who had software blocking. We've seen everything that a parent could do. And what they have in common is the outcome, right? And so that's one of the fundamental issues. And that's where either federal or state laws are going to really come into play. If we could get a state law, for example, that changed some of that, but that's part of the problem. And I want to add something Lizzie had said a little bit ago. The big thing that these companies are hiding, they already know how old we are. They use it for marketing purposes, and they're sort of hiding under the, well, but we asked and they said they were 22. Right. And that's it's a lie, basically, because their algorithms collect so much data that they know and exactly how old our kids are. They use it for marketing. They just don't want to be held accountable. And so personally, I mean, I think part of the way to do it would be by getting a system whereby we sort of codify or we require and say, look, if you're collecting data that tells you how old this kid is, you don't get to ignore that for purposes of age verification, because that is your actual knowledge. So we have to get really complicated because that's how they design it.
So glad you asked that question, because I've always wanted to ask that question and I keep forgetting. Yeah.
Can I bring up something positive as a resource? There's also a nonprofit, so not funded by industry, commercial industry in any way, a shoestring nonprofit called Screen Strong. Screenstrong.org is their website. And the book that I'm holding up is a course book meant for anybody age 10 and up. So, I mean, it would still be good for us, the adults in the room, to read through, but it's catered also so a 10-year-old can understand it. And it's full of illustrations, diagrams, 8 chapters long. And the premise is just the same way you teach a course in biology. How does your brain and your neurological system develop in a healthy way? When we use these products, these phones and social media products, how do those digital screens and online products, how do they impact and disrupt healthy brain development? And then what can we do? Because that's always, we talk about that everybody feels like they're in a trap. Well, what can we do and what are solutions to have healthy brains, healthy human to human relationships, healthy social development, a healthy neurological system? So in 8 chapters, this book goes through that. Dr. John Haidt has endorsed this book. And we are hoping schools, when they talk about digital literacy, will move a step forward and really think about using a book like this, because it goes down to empower everybody with the biology of really what's happening. So it's called Kids, Brains, and Screens. And I'm not paid a penny to promote it on the record, but I feel passionately that this sort of information needs to be accessible to everybody.
Yes,
Thank you. And Laura also has a handout for anyone who's interested in that talks a bit about three of the bills, the three main bills that are working their way through our process right now. The only one that's missing is the data privacy bill, which we can incorporate perhaps, Lizzie. We missed that one on the one pager, but yeah, I think there's a lot more conversation to be had. Did you have any other questions?
My general question is what you referenced in the very beginning, social media safety act. What are you trying to accomplish specifically?
Well, the Vermont Social Media Safety Act specifically, according to our Attorney General here in Vermont, who has sued Meta under the Vermont Consumer Protection Act, that lawsuit says that it is already illegal in Vermont for any company to develop or create products that are designed to be addictive. So the Vermont Social Media Safety Act seeks to bolster that authority. It would become a subchapter of the Vermont Consumer Protection Act, expressly prohibiting social media companies from making their product using design features that are addictive to kids. And then it also offers a whole framework for regulation and enforcement. So that's something that we don't have right now. The Consumer Protection Act relies on the wrongdoing. We need that to happen first in order to prosecute. But the Social Media Safety Act, similar to the Age Appropriate Design Code, is saying like, you need to tell us before this product is available in Vermont. There's a registry involved. It's like, you need to tell us that your product doesn't contain any of these features, that you're not and we don't, those features, what the features are today will be different tomorrow, will be different in 5 years. So it doesn't say like specifically, it's saying just, we know you're doing this, so stop doing it. Tell us you're not doing it. And then you need to do internal audits quarterly, and you need to have external audits annually and report to the Attorney General's office. So it's a broad regulatory scheme that's similar to how we regulate banking and insurance. So the argument that like, oh, you can't do this, this is compelled speech, you're forcing a company to share information that they shouldn't be forced to share. It's all hooey, in my opinion, because we do this already for other industries.
To that, I don't quite understand how you could regulate, say, social media or like, I don't understand how if a child or if anybody has the product in their phone, how can this bill affect their TikTok, say, or their
And Lizzie, do you want to answer that a little bit? How it would work or has worked? Would work in California if the lawsuit had gone differently. But how you all have worked on, and I want to say, if anyone has to leave, of course, please do, and especially Carrie, whose computer we're using for the Zoom.
Just let it run.
I think that's a fair question. Like, how can we say in Vermont or in California, like we need a different Instagram than the one that you use everywhere else?
Yeah, so the example I pointed to before was with the UK. It's really just a matter of changing these like little design features that at first feel innocuous, but they're really powerful stuff. Like I said, like turning off autoplay automatically for any user under 18, I believe, makes a big difference on YouTube for kids not to continue going through the rabbit hole. There are other things like reducing nudges that you see, or it could be a feature of turning off infinite scroll. It really is a case-by-case thing with each given platform.
Lizzie, can you talk a little bit about, and I'm punting this to you because I actually don't know the answer.
Yeah, like
I know
just like a kid in Vermont who has TikTok, their TikTok would be different from a kid in Montana. Because
Yeah,
we
I
have
mean,
these.
So you're saying,
Yeah.
like, the question is, how is it technically?
Yes.
So, and folks,
Achieve.
if I could jump in here, because
Yes.
I used to represent brokers and lenders in Washington State, and each state has its own Department of Financial Institutions, if you will, right? So when you do these things online, it's so much simpler than big tech wants us to think it is. So I worked again with brokers and lenders, not sophisticated tech companies. And when the Washington DFI said to, for example, you know, an Idaho lender, hey, you don't get to do business with Washington residents anymore, it would take them like a couple of hours. And they would be able to set up their website so that if somebody logged on and used a Washington phone number, right, or a Washington address, it would block them. It would, so they can program it very easily with certain criteria to say, okay, if A, B, C, and D are met, then the product features, it's going to operate as follows. It's all programming. They just don't want us to realize it's all programming because
So Vermont could have like a customized account, like.
Right.
And
It may
that's
not be
when
a
logging
perfect
in
system.
Vermont.
It's also similar to online gambling, which I know that Vermont's dealt with recently, but if online gambling isn't allowed in Vermont, the geofence around Vermont protects them from that. It's like, you know, somewhere I like to think of it, there's this on and off switch, and they're deciding to keep the on switch on all of these design features
I had no
in
idea.
Vermont.
Right. And I mean, basically, every time you use the internet, you know, the internet knows where you are.
Right.
So you have there's an IP address, which is geolocated.
Yeah.
Like it's actually.
I just didn't think that they had the capacity, like Laura's saying, it's not as, like, in my mind, it's like, wow, I thought TikTok was TikTok for every state, everywhere around the world. But then, of course, it's not.
No, I mean,
And again,
If I think
it's
about
so
other countries.
easy.
Yeah.
It's so easy that like mortgage broker companies that aren't tech companies were able to do it without any, I mean, we never got pushback from our clients when they're like, oh, okay, we'll just block Washington residents, not a problem. And they're not sophisticated, right? So, yeah.
and I mean, like, you know, log into Netflix in another country and you don't have the same, you don't. have the
Right,
same
of
select-
course.
Because
Yes.
of rights, like international rights
Rights.
for viewing. So.
Okay,
Except for
now I get your
VPN
bill. This is
possible.
really cool. Okay, good.
What about the VPNs where people can actually circumvent their location? I see some nods over here as well. How do you manage the VPN concept?
One thing I would say is, look, if all of these protections are not about, I mean, they're about what these companies are doing. If you've got a kid that is so sophisticated that they've set up a network with VPNs to bypass these protections, we're not, you know, it's not about getting everyone, right?
It's not a 100%, it's a layer.
No,
Progress,
but that's
not
going to be your
perfection.
exception.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you so much. Again, I'm so sorry about the totally unforeseen conflict, but I'm excited to share this recording, and I am really, really grateful to all of you for being here. Hopefully this will be the first and not the last time that we meet, because there is still so much discussion to be had. Did you have one more question?
Yeah, I just have a question for Zach, about, can you just clarify for me again that piece that you put forward at the very beginning of your talk about the question that was posed to young people? What was the difference between, like, yes, they would want themselves to be regulated, but they don't want to, can you just speak to that again? Because I want to grab that. I didn't. Totally.
Yeah. Sure. So the basic idea was that the students were asked the same question twice. And so one is, how much money would it take for you to deactivate your social media account, specifically Instagram and TikTok? And on average, the answer was the researchers would have to pay the participants $50 to do so. So it's like they would need to be paid to do it. In the second version, they said, what if we got most other people to also deactivate their accounts, including yourself? So it's not you wouldn't be the only one deactivating the account. How much would we have to pay you to deactivate your accounts if we got all these other people to do it? And the response was that the participants would actually pay the researchers to get people to do this. And what it's showing is that actually people don't want to be on the platforms, but they have to be on it because of the incentives that are set up right now.
Wow.
If that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
That is such a powerful, uh, just,
It's a powerful data
result
point.
of,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's the part that gave me goosebumps and it just makes my heart ache to think of our kids.
And that's why they're trapped,
Yeah,
because they're like,
yeah. And it's all
Yeah.
by design and it's all to maximize profit.
Have there been any like neurological studies like at the molecular level at all to really, because to try to make that connection and correlation from a legal perspective, I mean, that's hard to do, right?
Well, there have been, and I'm sure, Zach, you can speak to this as well. There's a large study at NIH, it's called the ABCD study, you can look it up, and has over 11,000 participants. And as early as 2018, this was not the first brain imaging study, but it was one of the most powerful ones because of the large sample size. As early as 2018, they were seeing brain imaging differences on MRI pictures of children who use the products more and children with less exposure. So the same way we think about smoking in lungs, we know what the healthy pink lungs look like and we know what the tarred lungs look like. That is the trend. Now there are more and more such brain imaging research that is coming out. And that is the picture we're seeing. Brains that are less exposed and brains that are more exposed do look different on MRI pictures. And we do even have longitudinal studies and not just cross-sectional studies. And I can actually, I'll share that with you after. I carry this all around in my bag all the time. So we have this research is out there, but there's no industry to fund the research. That's the point. It's up to volunteers and people independent at universities who, are trying to spread it and get it out there. And then there's also industry funding research to cast doubt on that research. And you have to really scrutinize and have a fine tooth comb and a fine filter to really find out. It's not going to be transparent who's funding the people that are casting doubt on the mountain of research. But obviously the media treats it as equal. So the counter argument gets equal treatment in the press, if you will. So it's a difficult uphill battle where I started saying what's public health and what is commercial profit in every industry is butting heads. So that's really, where we are with that. Zach, did you have anything else to say about the MRI or the brain research?
Yeah, I think that your response was great. What I would just add is with John and Jean Twenge, we have won a review doc of hundreds of studies, correlational, longitudinal, experimental, quasi-experimental, all making showing both sides. But then we've also written a number of articles making the case for causality. And so I can share all of that with any of you.
Great.
And I just wanted to make sure that we don't close before echoing Laura's point about the most vulnerable in our society and the most marginalized being targeted. I think that's because I work in a progressive world with a lot of well-educated, very influential people, Ivy League schools, high class, right? And I often hear people in my own cohort say things like, well, it's like, it's okay. And like, my kids are regulated and like, I can, that this idea that it minimizes the overall impact that this is having on our teen population because our kids in the well-resourced areas, we can buy ski passes, right? We can put them in private schools that don't have cell phones. We can, we have the time to figure out the parental controls, right? And so there's this real blind spot to this idea, and it's like it's like a bias or some false sense of like everything's okay, and when it's not okay. And for us as activists like myself, and from a faith-based background that has always fought for the poor and the rights of the poor, and who has fought for equity both on fronts of gender and with race, It's like, this is, what Laura said is absolutely true, that this is an issue. These kids, the poor kids are being targeted. The people of color are being targeted. And if we don't recognize that and also like help, if you're in the cohort that I'm in, really say, look, we got to wake up here because these are you want to fight for this, right? Like, even if it's not your kid who is affected. I have 3 boys. My 8-year-old's not going to go on through high school. Like, he doesn't get it. My older 2 have had cell phones, but we're such an actively engaged family. And like, I have time and that they will be okay. But I'm not here for them. Right? And so I'm here for even the girls that I never had. So anyway, that, I don't know, Laura, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and think of it on the statewide level too. And this is why like the devices and schools issues are so important and the ed tech, because we see that I meet families from more affluent neighborhoods where the schools do have the best software and they do have the best blocking tech. And then you meet a family. I met a woman whose son died from fentanyl poisoning, and she had begged the school, please, he's getting on Snapchat on the device, but the school was so, it didn't have the resources. So they didn't even have any blocking technologies.
Right.
So it impacts the schools too, and the bargaining power that these schools have when it comes to ed tech, right? These companies that are collecting our kids' data, and they're saying it's for educational purposes, but they, who knows what they're going to do with the data, even if they say, and the schools that have less resources have less bargaining power. They have less ability to protect these kids, and the kids are the ones that are suffering as a result.
It's the new digital divide. It's just going in the other direction. Yeah.
That's right, Zach.
Well, thank you for that and for everything, again, everything you're doing and for sharing your time with us today. Thank you all for being here. Again, this is the beginning of the conversation, or maybe we're somewhere near the beginning, middle, but there's a lot more to talk about. So we'll continue to talk about it and keep doing what we can do. Using, of course, aided by Zach's research and Laura's advocacy and the Center for Humane Technology and Lizzie continuing to try to fight for what we know is right. So thank you all. We'll end the recording and say goodbye for now. Thank you.
Thank you.